Good Thursday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com mailbag podcast presented by Blue Water Climate Control. Hey, a couple of things coming up with Blue Water Climate Control that is going to be of interest to you. You need to schedule a spring heating and air tune-up with Blue Water Climate Control. And if you do that between now and the spring game, your name will be entered into a drawing to win 2 Vol passes. That's 2 tickets to all 8 Tennessee home games this fall. Refer a friend and increase your chances to win as well. The drawing will be held April the 26th. You can call Blue Water Climate Control at 865-299-2290, or you can go to their website, bluewaterclimatecontrol.com, to schedule today. Again, schedule a spring heating and air tune-up, and you're going to be registered to win 2 tickets for all the Tennessee home games coming up this fall. But you want to jump on that quickly because that drawing is going to be held on April the 26th. With Rob Lewis and Austin Price and Brent Hubbs, glad to have you along with us, and we're going to jump right into the old mailbag questions here. And right out of the gate, who are a few players you're excited to hear about through spring practice under the new staff? And what do you think will be a few bumps this staff will have to go through in order to get the program, offense in particular, running like Josh Heupel wants it to run? All right, Austin, I'll start with you. Give me a couple of guys you're excited to see in spring practice or curious about.
Offensively, I'd go with any of those, soon to be sophomore wide receivers. I'm excited to see Caden Salter, see what he looks like. I know he's not the biggest kid in the world, so I do worry about durability a little bit. But I do think he could have kind of an extra gear that, maybe the other guys don't have. Interested to see Hendon Hooker. Defensively, I want to see what Isaac Washington has in spring. Defensive lineman that I think, could be really pretty good, when Tennessee starts to figure things out on defense. As far as bumps in the road, I think just finding their quarterback, whoever that is. Ultimately, if you have 4, you have none. Like, they need to find one, and then, no matter who that is, find a guy that they feel like can lead the offense and make plays.
Rob Lewis, throw a couple guys at me. Throw me your bumps in the road.
I think anybody that follows this team is curious about the like AP said, the crop of sophomore wide receivers. I want to see, are there really some playmakers there? Is Malachi Wideman a guy that can help you? Is Holiday, what can Heupel do with him? Can he make him, install some gimmicks and to use some of his skill sets? Callaway, I think we already know Jalen Hyatt can play, but those on offense, once you step outside the obvious of quarterback, there just seems to be a lot of intriguing talent at wideout. And I don't know if we get a final answer this spring, but I'd like to know if that's real or just, perception from recruiting. But I think all those guys are really exciting. Defensively, what do they do at linebacker? It, to me, is just, the most obvious question mark. And, can a guy like Tyler Barron really step up and emerge? I think we've talked about for a couple of years. Since Darrell Taylor left, who can rush pressure the quarterback on this defense? Is Tyler that guy? Does somebody over there emerge in that role?
Yeah, for me, defensively, I think it's a couple of guys. Where does McDonald play? Where does Bryson Eason play? 2 guys who I think can help this team if they can find a position for them. Where's the best fit for them in this defense? In terms of bumps that this staff's going to have to take, I think it's just, can they get this group of offensive guys to really execute this offense at the pace that they want it to execute at? They all act like, it's going to be easy to learn. It's not going to take just a minute to basically learn it. How realistic is that, and where is that at? So I think that's the biggest bump in the road for me, is just, can they execute this thing at the high pace that they talk about it being played at?
I'll add to this too. I think it's a small bump in the road, but how quickly can they take these kids that they're not sure what they're going to start them at a certain position, but they may have them in mind for another spot? How quickly can they kind of either say, okay, yeah, that kid is that position, or, hey, we're moving you. We want to see what you look like there. Because I think that the quicker you can get some of those things settled, I think the easier the transition.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. How fast do you find some of those guys at home? All right, on to the next one. I'm aware this is a way too early question. You always like it when they put that qualifier out there, Austin. If you had to put a guess.
Who's going to be the starting quarterback in 2027?
If you had to put a guess on record, what's the biggest change Josh Heupel will make between – I can't answer this question. The biggest change he'll make between year 1 and year 2? firing an assistant coach, giving up offensive play calling, renovating. It's not going to be renovating the weight room. I don't think that's going to happen. But as for the other stuff, let's see what year one looks like. I got no idea what year two. Heck, in this program, let's just make sure everybody gets to year two, right, Austin?
Who asked this question?
That was a question by Newval 1618. All right, let's move on to Bassmaster Ball here. Who are the top targets at running back? Are we making up any ground with Hayden, Horton, Miller, or Brown? Austin Price?
Well, I guess he's talking about Anthony Brown. I mean, I think Anthony Brown's a good player, not great. I mean, I know Alabama offered him. I don't think he would be a take at Alabama, though. I mean, to me, that was one of those token offers. I think they've made up some ground with Dallin Hayden, but they still trail. But again, this is a marathon, not a sprint for him, because he's not doing anything until he can take visits. Unlike some of these other kids who I think, by just after Tennessee's spring game could decide one way or the other on the Vols and go in a different direction or come here, But with Dallin, you have more time. You have at least another month. Because I think if they opened things up in June and he could take official visits, I think he would officially visit Tennessee in June. I think he'd officially visit Ohio State in June, Notre Dame in June. I mean, I think he would start rolling them in. As far as the other running backs, I think that the Robinson kid from Mississippi is probably a bit of a reach, but Tennessee's definitely swinging there. Tennessee's trying to be a bigger player in Mississippi. Let's face it, they can't really go back into Alabama right now after, some of the way that thing went south there. With Rock Taylor and so on and so forth. Tennessee's always going to recruit Georgia. I think they need to get out of the state of Florida. That's my take. I think that's the take of others over there in the building. But some of those coaches have ties, so they feel like they ought to swing down there. But you really look at it, Tennessee's best players from the state of Florida, Corey Vereen, Kurt Magid, some of those top players were just good, average to good players. They weren't top end guys. You can find similar players in states closer. I think Tennessee's got to be a bigger player in North Carolina than they're being right now. I think they would like to be, but I think it's a down year. And the fact that, Tennessee's kind of in a weird spot makes it tough for them to pull kids in. I think they should be a bigger player for even the 3 or 4 players in the state of Kentucky that are Power 5 type guys. So, as far as running backs, to me, it's the same crop that you've been looking at. The Austin kid from Georgia is another one they like. But they really want to be a player for a lot of these running backs we've talked about.
AP, why are kids in such a rush, do you think, this year when they have nobody's taken a visit in over a year and it's getting ready to get lifted, you would think in the summer. Well, I mean, I don't know.
But you go back and kind of your thought process this whole time is I'll have to see it to believe it, because they keep pushing it back and they keep pushing it back. Well, all these schools that are having success are telling these kids, oh, they're not going to open it May 31st. They were going to open it April 15th. They didn't do it. They pushed it back. They're going to keep pushing it back. So there's this, to me, like these kids are kind of buying into this, that it's not going to open up, better get a spot before they get left behind, and that's kind of where it's at. And let's face it, Tennessee has no juice in recruiting, and that's nobody's fault. That's not Josh Heupel's fault. That's not anybody on the staff's fault. It is what it is. Tennessee has got to find ways to be innovative. They got to find ways to be different. And right now, kids can't come to you and you can't go to the kids. So it's kind of hard to manufacture juice, which is why Tennessee's got to find a way to get some of these in-state kids to see the dream and kind of buy into, what Tennessee's selling.
So you think the big boys are using COVID to their advantage?
Yeah.
More so than they usually would. It's like part of their strategy.
I think in certain ways, and then I think that people around the kids are hey, you need to get in. But I think mostly it's I don't even think it's necessarily head coaches. I think it's more the position coaches that are recruiting areas.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. And now, if they open it up, it could make for a wild swing in terms of some decommitments and things like that this summer if guys are allowed to take visits.
You never saw that huge range of decommits last year because they never opened it up.
Yeah, they never got any visits. Everybody thought that was going to happen, but there was never any visits allowed. I think the other thing from a recruiting area standpoint, does this staff work the northern states more? Obviously, you've got some ties to Michigan and Detroit. You've got some ties up the eastern seaboard a little bit. Do they work that area more than we've seen Tennessee work it the last few years? Obviously, Tennessee tried, and we're making some grounds with Joe Acevet. He's no longer here. do they continue to push up Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey up that way?
I think there's no doubt they do. Tennessee's been in contact with Jimmy Scott, the one-time Vol commit who decommitted, and he's been on the phone with Mike Eckler. They're going to continue to recruit, I think, Ohio. And I mean, again, you're going to end up taking some guys that like Ohio State wouldn't take if you get into that world. But, I do think that, to me, like going to Ohio makes more sense than going to Florida, outside of saying you could get some of that Florida speed. I mean, I think that if you're going to go to Florida, you better go and get some legitimate guys that maybe be a touch undersized, but that can run. If you're trying to go down there and take a lineman and stuff like that, that's not ever had a good history for Tennessee.
And Tennessee has had some history up in the Northeast. I mean, back in, in Phillips later year.
Shad Baker, Turk McBride.
I mean, it's not.
Mark Jones was a solid player, not a great player, but he was a solid player from up there. I just wonder if if Tennessee doesn't go that direction and try to recruit up there, more than just spot recruiting, maybe a little more heavy recruiting up there. We'll see. All right, on to the next one. From a positive perspective, what feels different this time around with this staff? Well, listen, right now it's all window dressing. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I thought Rodney Garner said it best. It's a bottom line business. That's how you'll be evaluated. I think the biggest difference right now is you've had some access. You've had an opportunity to although it's via Zoom, at least hear from these guys and meet with these guys. And, that's not always been the case with previous staffs, not just Jeremy Pruitt's. I mean, you go back to Derek Dooley, he didn't talk to anybody after he was hired for 2 months before he let any assistant talk. And Josh Heupel knows that he needs to get some juice out there and get some branding out there. And so I think that's the biggest difference right now is he's allowed his staff to talk. And, Rob, that creates a little bit of a positive buzz because as a fan, you get to see what these guys are about and you get to see kind of what he's surrounded himself with.
Yeah, but I don't think there's any downside to that. And I don't understand why some head coaches are so restrictive in that regard. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Again, we used to watch scrimmages and get stats afterwards, and it didn't hurt anybody. It didn't hurt Tennessee's on the field.
Yeah, do you think? The last 10 years have been absolute trash. I mean, has the limited access, helped the program in any way? I don't think so.
Here's the other thing too that I will say is positive, and it's probably not talked about a ton across the board. We've talked about it a little bit here. I think the recruiting staff that he's put together, Austin, is a positive compared to other recruiting staffs because it's got ties to Tennessee, to understand how to recruit to Tennessee, and ties to the state of Tennessee. I do think that's an area where Josh Heupel has done well out of the gate with his recruiting staff.
Well, your defensive, kind of scout is Trey Johnson, went to Tennessee. Your offensive scout is Charlie High, who went to Tennessee and played, was a state record holder and 2-time state champ at CAK. You got Brandon Lawson, Tennessee guy, Angelia Brummett, Tennessee, Scott Altizer, Tennessee. So again, you may not have any former Vols on the coaching staff, but you do have plenty of former Vols in the building that can, say, hey, this is something we've had success in before. This is something that Tennessee's always done. Think about just little things like, running through the tee for the final time, like they did a couple of years ago.
And you got some grown-ups in that room now instead of a bunch of young kids who this is their first or second rung on the ladder.
Their fourth, fifth, and sixth recruiting person have experience. With the last staff, it was really kind of the top couple of people had experience, and then it was just a bunch of kids. A bunch of inexperienced kids.
All right, let's go on to I Heart Vols here. I'm not trying to push Rick out the door, Rob, but when he eventually decides to hang it up, how attractive will this job be to established coaches? It appears with the fan support, facilities, and what we're willing to pay, we should be in the tier below Kentucky and on par with programs like Florida, Wisconsin, Baylor, and West Virginia nationally.
I completely agree. And Rick Barnes will tell you the same thing. Rick will tell you that this place will support basketball. If you put a winning product on the floor, this university, this fan base, the boosters, they will support basketball as well as any place in the country that's not, Duke, Carolina, Kansas, Kentucky. And I mean, I think it'll be really attractive. I mean, again, it's not Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, North Carolina, but it's right there with anybody else. I think it'll be very attractive.
On to Bronco Vol, when does the NCAA plan to make a decision on whether schools can have some form of summer camps? I assume Tennessee's planning on being able to hold some type of camp this summer. Everybody's hoping it opens up in June. The NCAA is obviously going to have to make a decision on that. And once they do, things will get going in place there. Are they going to allow camps where you have 400 or 500 kids around or 300 kids around? I don't know if that's going to happen. But it just does feel like the way things are moving, the direction things are moving, there's going to be some kind of visits, but coaches and programs around the country are putting together plans for camps in June for there to be a potential regular camp season. The question is, when's the NCAA going to make a ruling on that? And then what kind of feeding frenzy is it going to be to get guys on your campus in a short window period of time? It's going to be pretty wild. There's no question about that.
I think that they could end up pushing camps back if they do away with the dead period at the end of June, 1st of July. Because like if they lift the dead period, for sure. Like to me, like you're not going to know that till like right at the end of May. Like you're going to find out like literally, and it's going to be like, okay, we're open. And so I think if they do that, to me, it behooves all schools, specifically Tennessee, to have their camps, if they're allowing them, during what would be the traditional dead period. I'm assuming that there would be no dead period during those 2 weeks, because normally, during that month, really.
Yeah, July is dead. So
yeah, it's the last week of June, and then the first 3 weeks of July, because high schools have their own dead period at the end of June, so it would make some sense. So it wouldn't take away from the high school coaches the time with their own high school teams. But again, though, that would also cut into summer vacations for some and this and that.
Yep.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, they've been dead for over a year. I mean, I don't think there's a downside to open it up in July.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think high school coaches would have some issues with that because, they didn't get July last year, and this year they're obviously hoping to get a regular summer off season, regular July prep for, for August, start of the season in August. But we'll see. I mean, the NCAA might rule on something, late April, mid to late April on what they're going to do on June 1st. And if that's the case, then maybe you do put camps together in the month of June. I know every school around the country has camp dates set in the month of June. They haven't sent anything out, but we'll send those out immediately if the NCAA makes a ruling on lifting the dead period. Now, if they wait till the last week of May or last 10 days of May to make that decision, then obviously that's going to be very different.
See, don't you think, before we go any further, don't you feel like that they, I mean, like, I think every time they've had the intention of opening it up, and then they just don't, the stats and stuff don't improve enough to warrant doing that for them. So like, don't you think that you almost have, I mean, like they'll have to almost wait till pretty close to time. Maybe they don't wait till the 30th, but maybe they wait till the 20th. Point is, I think it would be a quick turnaround.
Maybe depends on where numbers are in late April. How many baseball teams are going to have full stadiums? The Texas Rangers are talking about having 40,000 people in their stands. I mean, if some places are going like that, I don't know. We'll see. You're right. If they wait till mid-May, it's hard to put camps together in the month of June. So we'll see what happens there.
What happens first? You shave, or there's an on-campus visit?
Oh, I'm shaving before there's an on-campus visit. I guarantee you that. No way this thing's going to keep going like this. I can promise you that.
There, Eric.
All right, which do you
trying to whip up a craft cocktail?
When I'm getting screenshots from Steve Early of the Vol Network that have Eric O'Bannon pictures during my daily life, you know that Hubs has hit on something.
The beautiful part of that is I have no idea who that is. I thought the guy played at UCLA back in the day.
That's Ed O'Bannon.
All right, which defensive line benefits the most from being coached, mentored by Rodney Garner? Which guy does this benefit the most?
Man, that's a good question. To me, like Tennessee's, I don't know how you guys feel, but like I feel like Tennessee's defensive line, they're all kind of the same guy. I mean, like there might be one or two that might be out of shape, like just different guys, but like for the most part, I don't feel like there's any like real difference between those guys in a lot of ways. So I don't know if it benefits any particular one person.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I mean, I think Big O has the capability, maybe that Rodney Garner brings it out of him. We'll see. But I mean, like, I could also make a case that Big O's future is at offensive tackle.
Yeah, I mean, I look at a guy like Matthew Butler or Rob, and I wonder, is he kind of is what he is at this point? I mean, he's been here so long. Is there really a whole lot going to change in terms of his game under the tutelage of somebody new? You kind of wonder about that. So you think maybe a young guy, is it a guy like Amari Thomas? And I'm with you, Austin. Where's a guy like Dominique Bailey? What does he look like? Middleton probably has the most talent, right, Rob? The question is, if he buys in, I'd say it would be him, right?
Middleton is my answer, just
okay,
because I just think he has untapped potential. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but just his size, I mean, the measurables, it just feels to me like there's more in the bucket there that we haven't seen yet. And, you wonder, and he's, JUCO guy, hasn't been here that long, had two different position coaches. To me, that would be my answer. Even though he's a veteran, I still think that there's untapped potential there from him.
All right, onward. We got a quarterback question. Did Tennessee offer AJ Swain any other quarterbacks besides Jackson? Austin Price.
At this point, no. It's kind of. I mean, I think Tennessee likes AJ Swain a lot. But at this point, like Taven Jackson makes probably the most sense because Tennessee's got more time to recruit him and pull themselves back into the mix.
All right. On to basketball here. Do you think any of the following are back next year? Pember Walker, Euros. Also, how's Tennessee looking with 5-star Cane Ridge's Brandon Miller?
I'm not going to speculate on anybody that's not going through the draft that might transfer. I mean, I would anticipate some roster movement. There always is. Brandon Miller, Tennessee is recruiting him hard. They had him in for an unofficial visit last year before the shutdown. In talking to people, I don't get the impression that he is very deep in his recruitment as far as narrowing things down because of the lack of visits. But if I just had to speculate right now, I would say Tennessee's top 5, but it's not like he's a laydown for the Vols by any stretch of the imagination.
All right, on to the next hoops question. What are you guys predicting on how far this basketball team goes in the NCAA tournament? Who wants to jump in there first? Austin, Rob?
If Fulkerson plays like he did on Sunday, I think they can make the Sweet 16. If he plays like he did, the 2 or 3 weeks before that, I think they maybe come home after the first game.
I'm going to win it all.
I'm going all the way, Austin.
Nice. I think there's a greater chance they win it all in Nashville than they make it past the Sweet 16 in the NCAA tournament.
I think that this team's going to go 1-1. I think they'll win the first game, but not get through the first weekend, just because of their inconsistencies. Not because they're not talented enough to get there, just because we've not seen them put anything together back to back at this point in time.
And if they're going to be, as of today, what are they, 6 seed? Most likely, if they don't help themselves, if they go 1-1 in Nashville, so they're going to be playing somebody really good in the second game. And if Fulkerson gives them 14-7, like he did against Florida, they can beat that 3 seed. If he gives them 4 points and 4 rebounds, they got no shot.
Yep, I agree with you. Do you see the NCAA changing the rule from 25 scholarships with all the transfers? I don't either. I don't see it at this point.
I think that's one of those untouchable baseline numbers, personally.
Now we'll see what happens as everybody gets a better feel for the one-time transfer rule, but I just don't see them changing the 25 rule. They might drop the 85 at some point, where you could have essentially, 100 guys on scholarship, but I don't see that either. I think it's going to stay 85-25 for the foreseeable future. I just don't see a big movement there in that direction.
And I think that's and the reason why, as things are now, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, they could sign 30, 35 guys.
Yes.
And I think the 25 rule is hard and fast.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. All right, Austin, how do the 4 in-state guys How do the 4 in-state offensive linemen rank on Tennessee's board? Anderson, Hood, Kudus, Grayson, Morgan.
I would put Kudus and Fisher Anderson at the top, and Hood and Grayson Morgan 3 and 4. I would put Morgan. I probably would put Morgan ahead of Hood.
Okay. Expectations on this defense. Then he wants to know Sal Sinceri bad. The answer is they're not going to be Sal Sinceri bad. They're going to have growing pains. They're going to have issues, but they're not going to be that bad. That was more about incompetence than it was lack of talent when you talk about that defense. You guys may already weighed in on a thread, but would like to hear your thoughts on the Rush Probst recording.
Are we surprised?
Nobody's surprised by anything he said, and nobody expects anything to come from it.
Yeah, I mean, the credibility of, what's his credibility factor? I think is the question with everybody. And I said this in another thread. I mean, if somebody has to investigate something, then they will investigate, then they will take care of it in short order, and they will move on from it. And it will not become, I don't think it'll become anything of significant to anybody anywhere in the Southeastern Conference with the schools that he mentioned.
I don't think Georgia is going to dig it up.
Yeah, I don't think Rush Pro is going to be coaching anywhere anytime soon in the 2 states he's made his living in. So I think he's ended that hope for himself. So, but in terms of something significant coming from it, I just don't.
Rush is going to be going witness protection.
Yeah. In the press conference with Jean, how do you say it? How do you say it, AP? Are we just going to call him BJM? What are we going to call this guy?
Well, I'm going to call him BJM because it just is easier. Brian Jean-Marie.
Jean-Marie. I was never very good in French. All right. Suggested that he sees a lone middle linebacker behind a 4-man front flanked by either 2 outside linebackers or 1 with a 50B. Given your present roster, where do you project the 2 deep middle linebacker and the rest of the linebackers? I don't know if they got a 2 deep at linebacker. I don't have any idea. I mean, in the middle, one would think Jeremy Banks is right there in the middle, right? You gonna play him in the middle? Huh?
By default.
So I have no idea how that's going to shake out. Where does Bryson Eason play? Where does McDonald play? Can Aaron Beasley play at all for this team? I think, as you mentioned earlier, Rob, in the podcast, I think that's the biggest question mark on defense is just how does the numbers shake out? Who shakes out where at the linebacker position? All right, on to the next one. Who's the biggest freak athlete you've ever seen on Tennessee's campus?
Cordero Patterson's on the very short list.
Yeah, I think Cordero Patterson could have played.
And Keon Johnson.
Yeah, Keon Johnson could have played multiple sports.
Ulysses Alexander.
I'll tell you the biggest one I've ever seen on campus, he just didn't end up playing here, was Randy Moss. He slept during his visit here. And he went to the pool, right? On his official visit. He went and swam in the indoor at the old aquatic center with people standing and watching him continuously jump off the diving board.
Dane Bradshaw probably deserves a mention.
Dane Bradshaw. All right, on to the next one. Would be interested to hear what you think has changed in recruiting JUCOs over the years. I could be wrong, but it feels like success rates are down outside of just UT. Obviously, we probably had extreme success and more recently pretty low rate hits. Do you think this is a wider spread trend? Maybe more so due to today's type of player, mindsets across the board as well. More schools playing near the big stage, and parity all over might be the largest contributor.
I just think, Brent, that it boils down to it's much easier to get kids in school. You don't see as many kids academically. Think about back when I first started covering recruiting, and it was even way more for when you guys started doing it. You just every year you would get 3 or 4 kids that were right on the borderline, and several times they'd end up being academic casualties and either having to go to prep school or go to JUCO. And you just don't see that much anymore. So now really kids that go to JUCO are ones that couldn't sign anywhere big and they chose to go JUCO, or, just different stories.
I think high schools do a better job of getting kids, if a kid, because of rivals and everybody else, I think kids get identified earlier. They're going to have a chance to be a recruitable athlete. And I think coaches and support staff do a much better job of in high school of steering those kids in the right direction academically. And I also think there's a lot more options prep school wise, other than, Hargrave or, Fork Union than there were back in the day, where kids could take a 50 if they need to.
Yeah, and I just think, I mean, I'm with you guys. I think the academic counselors at the high school level are getting guys on track much earlier. So it's not like a guy's sitting there second semester of his junior year going, "Hey, I think I got a chance to play college ball. What do I got to do?" And it's too late for them. I think the other thing that's going to affect recruiting, and it's just starting to come into play, is the transfer portal. I think if you're looking for immediate help, you're going to look for a guy who has played at the college, maybe has played at the college level or was good enough to sign with a college team out of high school, and you're probably not going to recruit the JUCO ranks as hard as you once did. I just, I think with the transfer portal, that's going to change junior college recruiting a great deal when it's all said and done. But I think the biggest factor is what you guys have mentioned, and that's the fact that more guys are academically eligible coming out of high school than we've ever seen before. I just think that's the way it is. Last couple here, we saw a release of all the early enrollee numbers and their pictures and jerseys, but there was no mention of Young or William Parker. Is there anything there? They still with the team? They put those pictures out a day or so later, right?
Yeah, they're fine.
Yeah,
Like,
all those guys are there. I saw.
Well, that's the thing is like right now everybody's just oh, they're putting a picture out there. Like, well, Williams is not a big Twitter guy, and then Byron, I mean, he's tweeting pictures of the ball walk. I mean,
Right.
those guys are fine.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. All right, do we have enough speed in the defensive backfield to compete in the SEC? And are there any new freshmen who has elite speed? We know that Jalen Wright has elite speed. Austin, that's not on the defensive side of the ball. We know that. We talked about this a little bit in the podcast on Monday. I think because he knows his guys and he recruited them, I think Willie Martinez has got some more positivity about his group. And I think there's a feeling that maybe that group, while they don't have depth numbers, is not as talent poor as maybe it would be perceived. Now, obviously, they'd like to have Keyshawn Lawrence, and that's a big loss. But I think, Rob, because Willie Martinez knows that group, he feels a little more confident about them than probably most people thought.
Yeah, he was pretty upbeat the other day. I mean, I was surprised at how kind of optimistic or positive he was about his group. I mean, he didn't poor mouth him, which or kind of set the bar too low, which surprised me.
Yeah, it did.
I'm not saying he should have slammed him. I'm just saying. I mean, he was.
Well, he clearly knew him. I mean, he knew. I mean, he recruited Alante. He recruited Theo Jackson. He recruited Danico Slaughter. I mean, he knows those guys because he had tried to recruit them. And I'd say that's probably the lone position coach on the defensive side of the ball that tried to recruit a bunch of guys in his room. I'd say more of the other coaches didn't try to recruit those guys. And so I think there's some familiarity there that probably gives him a more upbeat about it. Again, proof will be when they go to the practice field, and that's coming up here in a couple of weeks. Tennessee will hit the practice field and get spring practice started. Of course, we'll have tons of coverage of that, hopefully with some access. Austin, you look like you're going to say something.
We pray. We pray we do.
We pray we get some access.
I mean, that's the ththing is like I can make a case for Tennessee winning 8 games next year. I can make a case for Tennessee winning 4 games next year. Like, I mean, like you don't know. Like, no, and you just don't know how the staff's going to mesh. I mean, yeah, I think the offensive side will be fine because they've all coached together. I mean, outside of a couple of guys, and I think that just makes it easier to fall in line. But you just don't know. You don't know. I would have thought that the staff a year ago or 2 years ago would have ended up being, having better chemistry than it did, that led into last year. So until they get out there and they start practicing, they start working together, no one knows. I mean, the staff chemistry could be awesome on the staff, which could make a huge positive for the program.
Yeah, we'll see what it looks like and see what they are again. Hopefully, the opportunity to see them. And again, there's just so many questions that right now it's all speculative answers that nobody knows if there's any what it's going to look like, whether it's the quarterback position, linebacker position, or whatever it is. I do want to at the door throw this out for one of the best athletes to have been on campus. Where do y'all put Fortenberry? I mean, he was on campus every day. You putting Fortenberry in the list? Anybody?
Let me tell you what I think this is. Lame.
Right.
Gordon Berry and his boy Woody Quinn.
We're going to, oh, wow, the volleyball guy. We're out the door on that, Neil. This has been the Volquest.com mailbag podcast presented by our good friends at Blue Water Climate Control. For Austin Price and Rob Lewis, I'm Brent Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your Thursday, everybody.